Welcome to episode 9 of Tales of the Ultimate Sportsman. This is Jon Hedin, your host. This episode, we have a lot of funny stories, mostly fishing, but one hunting story about a dog. I think you'll like it. Anyway, take care out there and see you next time.
Gunner Tales. Gunner gets P.O'D. Rick Domras. Castroville, California. Tom's wife was always a little afraid of Gunner. Not that I blamed her. For one thing, Gunner was bigger than she was. Tom said Gunner was 125 pounds, but he seemed bigger than that to me. Gunner was always larger than life. Gunner was a male Chesapeake retriever, and he was just plain intimidating. I always had the feeling that he didn't belong in our era, and that he would be happier crushing the neck of a woolly mammoth. I used to call him Jurassic Dog. Early on, Tom tried to allay his wife's fears by taking Gunner and her to see a professional dog trainer. The trainer studied Gunner for some time and said, "Your wife is absolutely right about this dog. Sometime soon you and Gunner are going to have to fight to see who is going to be the dominant one. Good luck." And so it came to pass one day in Tom's garage. Tom, with assistance from a handy 2x4, emerged victorious. From that day on, Gunner was a great dog and never hurt a fly, but he could still intimidate people. One time, we were setting out our duck decoys in the pre-dawn darkness and heard some other guys approaching. We shined our flashlights at them to let them know we were already there, but they ignored it and started to set up nearby. Gunner went over to explain to them that this spot was taken. The guys packed up and left. In all the years we hunted with Gunner, we never had anyone crowd us. Gunner loved me passionately, that's another story, but he couldn't abide bad shooting. I, on the other hand, am one of the worst shots in California. I have my good days, of course, but this wasn't one of them. Tom had long since limited out, but I still needed 2 more ducks. I had missed the last 6 ducks, and Gunner was getting P.O'.'d. We were hunting out of a pair of sunken barrels at the Los Baños wildlife area, with Gunner standing between us. A pair of mallards came in, and I missed them both. Gunner gave me a dirty look. You have to picture it. I'm sitting in this sunken barrel with only my head above ground and staring up into those yellow prehistoric wolf eyes. Nobody could give a dirty look like Gunner. I miss another duck, and Gunner showed me his teeth. Yes, Gunner, I know about the teeth. I've seen you crush a rock the size of a baseball with those teeth. I missed another pair. Dog saliva began to drip on my shoulder. It's okay, Gunner. I'll get the next one. I didn't. Gunner began to growl. A low rumbling like distant artillery fire. Take it easy. I'll get the next one, I promise. 6 mallards came gliding in. I waited till they had their feet down before I rose up to shoot. I emptied my gun at them. Not a feather. I couldn't believe it. I sat back down, hanging my head in shame. I didn't have the nerve to look at Gunner. Something was hitting my hat. I didn't know what it was until I smelled it. Gunner was peeing on my head. There wasn't much I could do about it. Being a large guy in a small barrel, I certainly wasn't going to turn around. Thank God for Gore-Tex. I've often thought of sending the Gore-Tex people a testimonial. Not only is your product waterproof, but anyway, I knew I deserved it, and having thus atoned for my sins, I felt better. I killed the next 2 ducks. I guess I just needed the proper motivation. Gunner was pleased.
A devil of a dilemma. Lee, Catfish, Kempster, Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. A few years ago, a good friend asked me to go on a short fishing jaunt with he and his uncle. Being a true fishing fanatic, I of course said yes. We arrived at our destination, a small reservoir behind just south of Ottawa, Ontario, Canada. As soon as we arrived, we started casting with small spoons in an attempt to lure one of the nice smallmouth bass that we knew inhabited these waters. After about 10 minutes of casting and retrieving our spoons, my friend's uncle hooked a sizable bass. A short fight ensued, and the fish was finally in sight. Just before he could scoop it up with a net, a large northern pike darted out of the weeds next to shore, snatched the bass off the hook, and then disappeared into the tea-stained water. My friend's uncle was furious and promptly tied on a large red devil spoon. hoping to attract the pike to strike again. His first cast landed in the heart of the grass-like weeds from which the pike had first appeared. After retrieving the lure a few feet, it got snagged on the weeds. With a mighty tug, the lure came flying out of the weeds like a rocket, whirring past my head and coming to a stop with 2 prongs of the hook lodged barb deep into my friend's uncle's bald head. After a flurry of cursing, the likes of which only a seasoned fisherman or maybe a merchant marine could match, he asked us to take a close look at the cranially lodged lure to see if there was any way we could remove it without removing most of his scalp. There wasn't. We packed up our gear and piled into his old beat-up Chevy and headed to the nearest town in search of our doctor. Once in the car, we settled down a little. About a minute later, a small giggle escaped my friend's mouth, which in turn triggered a bout of hysterical laughing from both of us. After a minute or two, we calmed down and wiped the laugh-induced tears from our eyes. My friend's uncle looked a little peeved at us, so I suggested that he look in the mirror. Adjusting the rear-view mirror so he could get a look at his head, he was able to see the large red and white spoon lying almost perfectly in the middle of his pinkish sunburned scalp. After a pregnant pause, he started howling with laughter. 15 minutes later, we pulled up to a little clinic in the town of Carlton Place. Before we exited the vehicle, my friend's uncle fished an old baseball cap out of the back seat and placed it very gingerly on top of his skull. Walking into the clinic, he sidled up to the small reception desk and rang the little bell to get the attention of the nurse on duty. A strikingly attractive lady came to greet him. She asked him what the emergency was, and, with a smile, he removed his cap. She stared blankly for a moment, as if she didn't quite believe what she was seeing. And then the dam broke, and she broke into a fit of laughter, which of course set the 3 of us off too. The doctor then appeared out of the back, apparently to investigate what the laughing was all about, and, getting a good look at the lure dangling from my friend's uncle's head, he also started to laugh. After a bit, we all calmed down, and the doctor whisked his patient into his office and promptly removed the object of our mirth from the vast expanse of bald scalp. Needless to say, the fishing trip was over for the day, but we were all left with a truly unique, but factual, fishing story to tell our friends.
AEJ's Bass by Jon Hedin, Wyoming, Minnesota. The phone rang, and I already knew it was Mark on the other end. ES, P, I guess. John, we're still on for tonight, right? He asked. Yeah, of course. But you mean tomorrow, don't you? 3 o'clock in the morning is tomorrow. I corrected him. Mark argued back. In my book, 3 a.m. is the same as tonight. Maybe because Mark doesn't wake up that early too often, I thought to myself. Hey, do you have enough room to bring AJ with? Mark asked. AJ is Mark's 10-year-old son. I drive a 4-wheeler with a king cab that was produced before there were real king cabs. The truck just has a skinny bench in back of the bucket seats in front. I don't know. Will he want to sit in the back? I asked. He would ride in the box if he had to. He really wants to go, Mark went on. He's been bugging me all week. He says he'll be the bait boy, boat boy, and the beer boy. We both said beer boy at the same time. Ding dang dong. Dong ding doon, the doorbell rang. I jumped up and spilled coffee all over my lap. Man, Mark, you're going to wake the wife. I whispered, don't ring that doorbell ever again. I thought you were still snoozing, Mark whispered back. Then came a noise from the bedroom. It was my wife, who likes fishing about as much as a hooked fish likes fishing. So, when you guys coming back home? She growled. Sunday, honey. About noon or so. I said, but never got a response. She must have gone back to sleep. We got the boat, loaded, and slid it into the back of the truck. 3 hours later, we're at the start of the 2-mile-long trail that leads to the lake. My butt hurts. A voice complained softly from the back seat. Then you're really going to like this, I said, as we drove over a hill, and before us was a soft puddle about 30 yards long over the trail. You got to be kidding, blurted AJ, much louder now. You're not really going through there, are you? We have to, I explained, unless you want to carry the boat and all the stuff in it the half-mile down to the lake. Go for it, was all Mark said. I shifted into ultra low and stuck in third gear, my favorite, and stepped on the gas. The little truck jumped and shook and spun right through that puddle and a couple of smaller ones. "Hee-haw!" yelled Mark. "Cool!" exclaimed AJ. We drove up to the camping spot, and it looked the same as when we left it 2 years before. In an hour, we had camp set up and were fishing for bass and sunnies. We were catching sunnies one after another, all keepers, and weighing in at almost a pound apiece. I cast my little 1/32 jig next to a tree stump that was sticking out of the water in about 15 feet of water. Tap, tap, I felt on my rod tip, gave my standard 1001 delay, and set the hook. This ain't no sunny. I hollered to Mark and AJ as my drag started singing. "He's coming up," I shouted. And just then he went airborne, showing all of his 6 pounds. I fought that fish for at least 10 minutes with my 4 pounds ultralight pole. Finally, he tired, and I got him into the boat. It was time for lunch, so I thought I would get my camera out of the truck and take some pictures of the big bass before I let him go. Mark took a picture of me with my bass. I said, "Hey, AJ, you want a picture of you and your bass?" "Mine," he asked. "You caught it." I joked. "Yeah, but only the 3 of us know it. You can tell all your friends you caught it." "Cool," said AJ. We took his picture and then returned the big bass to the lake. We caught all kinds of fish that weekend, but never got any more really big bass. I didn't see Mark for a couple of weeks following that weekend. Then one day I stopped over after work. Mark said, "AJ's been showing the whole neighborhood that picture of your bass, saying that he caught it." Yeah, I told him he could tell his friends. I explained, but I didn't say the whole world. Just an AJ came to the door and said, "Hey, you see my bass yet?" Sticking the picture up to my nose. "AJ." I was there, remember I told him. He looked at me like I was from outer space. Then he yelled, "That was the biggest bass I ever caught," and ran out the door, back to playing with his friends. I looked over at Mark. He looked down and just shook his head, then looked at me sorrowfully, like his kid had just struck out in the last of the 9th inning. Then he looked at me again, and we both just laughed and laughed.
Fishing Trip Gone Snaky by Julia, Somerset, Kentucky. This is my fishing story. This is a story that I don't like telling about myself, but for a chance to win a t-shirt, I'll make an exception. When I was a young girl, age not important, some friends and I went night fishing. My friends had all caught a few fish and had them on a stringer in the water. Well, out of the corner of my eye, I caught a glimpse of something retreating up the bank, next to where I was sitting, so I screamed really loud. Someone moved the lantern to see what was crawling up the bank. I couldn't believe it. It was a snake. I don't know what kind. I didn't take the time to find out. It had one of the fish we were using for bait in its mouth, and it was climbing up the bank with it. Well, the light scared it back in the water, and away it went. After a while, I had calmed down enough to try my luck at fishing again, seeing as I was the only one who hadn't caught a fish all night. I was getting tired of the fish stealing my bait, so I said the next bite that I got, that fish was coming in. A few minutes later, I got a nibble, and I knew that I had to either jerk it then and there or let it have my bait again, and no way was I doing that. I gave it a big jerk, and out of the water it came and landed right on my face. All I could think about was that darn snake. I was yelling, "Get it off, get it off." They were all laughing at me like I was some kind of a nut over being afraid such a small fish. But I didn't know it was a fish, and I thought it was that darn snake. Oh well, you can imagine how long it took for me to live that one down. I hope this story was good enough to win the contest, or else I've told a secret on myself for nothing.
Dear Son, a letter about my first fly and my last wife by John Baker, Dayton, Ohio.
Dear son, have patience, please. I can explain where I've been the past year and a half. I've been fishing. It all started with a wedding I went to not long ago. You remember your Aunt Darlene? Well, her daughter, Cousin Emmy, got married. She married a chap from Iceland. Well, naturally, Iceland made me think of fishing right away. But what with the divorce and all, well, let me explain. You know that I have never been one for social affairs. not being the type who likes to socialize. However, Neil, the chap from Iceland, is, in spite of being some kind of materials specialist who is working on his doctorate, is a good old boy. We discussed Icelandic fishing in depth. Can you imagine 6 months of daylight? Boy, fish till you drop. Well, the wife seemed to have felt that I was monopolizing the groom's time and was quite upset with me by the end of the evening. Odd. Weddings usually made the little darling quite romantic. I smoothed things over pretty well with some very earnest, albeit insincere, promises that this would never happen again, and things were pretty well normal until we arrived home. There on the porch sat my Christmas present. I ordered it myself. A fly tying kit. You see, the wife did not really understand the concept of sport fishing. To her, fish are food. You go, you catch a fish, you come home. With the fish. The subtleties of catch and release are, I'm afraid, lost on her. Well, anyhow, there on the porch was my fly tying kit. I had ordered a fly tying kit, battery heated socks, and a fly reel with an adjustable drag. Man, I was ready to fish. All I needed to do was tie my first fly. But no. I couldn't go tie a fly because she wanted to know what was in the box. She insisted on looking. I was positive I'd told her about the socks and the reel. Imagine that. Overspending your Christmas allowance. Well, I eventually got that smoothed over. I explained that I needed a new reel if I was to start bringing home fish, and that in long term we would save this money by buying less food. And if you're going to be fishing in the winter, you need battery heated socks, right? She looked at my fly tying tools and fur and feathers. A lot of it was made in Latin America. Honestly, I had no idea child labor was used that extensively down south. In an attempt to smooth this over, I tried explaining what each and everything was for. Feathers make the tails on the fly, and the fur and thread make the body. That frilly stuff around the front of the fly, well, that is called hackle. Say it one time, hackle. Now, say it real fast a couple of times. Hackle, hackle, hackle. Kind of sounds like you're trying to clear your throat, doesn't it? Later that evening, when we were cozy on the couch, I nestled up to her ear and said, hackle, hackle, hackle. And well, my throat cleared. Bang, right on the new dress. I went off to the basement to tie my first fly because that was where I was going to be sleeping anyway. Actually, I was fairly excited. I didn't think I'd be allowed to tie a fly on a night that just happened to be our anniversary. I made some coffee, set my tools in order on my workbench, adjusted the lights, and got ready to tie. I was going to tie my personal favorite fly, the woolly bugger. My hopes were high, but my expectations were more realistic. In no way, shape, or form did I think that my first fly would catch a fish. I knew this was a learning session only. I discovered that I had a lot to learn. I had white marabou feathers, yellow feathers, and every color under the sun except black. Well, I happen to favor blacktail feathers, but knowing that my first fly would probably be unfishable, I opted to make the tail white and red. I had decided to make the most colorful woolly bugger in the world. Boy, those marabou feathers are so soft and fragile. The fine, dainty strands of feathers just sort of drifted in the breeze and floated ever so gently into the furnace. The cold air returned by my just set up fly tying bench created just a bit more of an air current than I realized. I had forgotten to buy a new furnace filter after throwing the old one away, so maybe the breeze blew somewhat stronger than usual. In the process of tying on the feathers, and remembering how often the flies I bought came apart, I decided to use lots of head cement to make the fly more durable. Do you know that stuff smells a lot like model glue? I had a great big bottle of head cement. I used a lot, and that gosh darn furnace pulled those fumes right into my face, me being by the cold air return and all. Phew, a rather heady aroma. I tied in my white marabou tail feathers after much trial and error. I was more than willing to consider those feathers lost in the wind as acceptable losses on my first fly. I lost a lot of feathers. I waited a few minutes to tie in a chartreuse hackle because the day-glow purple feathers stuck to my fingers and it took a minute or two for the glue to dry. Well, I could have used an extra hand or two, but I finally got that sucker all finished. And in the end, I used a lot of cement. Proudly, I went upstairs to display my creation to my wife. I didn't realize how dizzying those glue fumes were, and I lost my footing, fell, and landed on the coffee table that she had bought for her Christmas present. Crystal, china, whatever. It's all just dishes to me. At this point, she took off and started talking about 250 miles an hour in that native dialect of hers, and it began to sound like some sort of mantra or holy chant, and it all became clear to me. In my glue-induced glory, I felt that like a Native American Indian fasting and praying to see his vision, I needed to glue feathers on my fingers and stick a woolly bugger in my lip to see my vision. I laid on the floor looking at the overhead light, thinking it was the brilliance of God for what must have been 20 minutes, drawing all sorts of conclusions concerning fishing and the oneness of it all. I never did really find out what she said. All I understood, after my mind began to clear in the fresh air, was that it had to do with me, her, fishing, and our relationship. Well, that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. You see, a single man can fish all the time. Oh, at times I'm curious about what she must have said while I lay there on the floor. But all in all, it's water under the bridge. The last I heard, she had remarried an accounting professor. Take care until I see you again. Love, Dad.
Well, now that was a fun episode. I hope you enjoyed it as much as we did. And if you want to see more episodes, please subscribe or follow. Take care and be careful out there.